Hi, I'm Gary, and this is episode 242 of EV Musings, a podcast about renewables, electric vehicles, and things that are interesting to electric vehicle owners. On the show today, we'll be looking at the BYD Dolphin. This season of the podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. Before we start, just a reminder that you can support the show through either Patreon or Ko-fi.com. Links are in the show notes. Every little helps. Thank you. Our main topic of discussion today is another in our occasional series where I chat with EV drivers about the vehicles they own and what it's actually like living with them. And in this episode, we'll be looking at the BYD Dolphin. So let's get the basics out of the way. According to the official BYD webpage, the Dolphin comes in 4 different trims: Active, Boost, Comfort, and Design. Active and Boost have a 44.9 kilowatt-hour battery and charge at a maximum of 65 kilowatts. Comfort and Design have a 60.4 kilowatt-hour battery and charge at a maximum of 88 kilowatts. The WLTP combined range for the Active is 211 miles, the Boost 196 miles, the Comfort and Design 265 miles, with efficiency ratings around 3.9 miles per kilowatt hour. Prices between £25,000 and £31,000 depending on which model you get. And to put that into perspective, prices for the Peugeot E208 only start where the Dolphin prices top out. And for the Volkswagen ID.3, you'd need an extra £4,000 to get the entry level. There are numerous YouTube reviews of the Dolphin out there, and they're all fairly consistent in their conclusions. It's a great little car, well appointed, well built, but perhaps a little underpowered and probably not a long-distance runner. But how much of that is true? And can you really get a good idea of an electric car in a 2-hour test drive? Well, I maintain that no, you can't. Which is why I want to bring on Adrian Bond, who's owned a Dolphin for 6 months. So welcome to the show, Adrian. Can you start by introducing yourself and tell people a little bit about what kind of work you do?
Thanks, Gary. So I'm a chartered electrical electronic systems engineer, and I work in sort of technical assessments in London. And how I ended up going into electric vehicles is back in 2008, things changed. Became parents. Things often change when you become parents, especially your view of the world. And about 8 years after that, our son was rushed to hospital due to a severe asthma attack, which the hospital put down to air pollution. And that really did change our focus on how to improve how we drive and the sort of air quality. So I ended up becoming admin of the Colchester Electric Vehicle Society, a volunteer for the Colchester Clean Air Campaign, early supporters of Electric Vehicle England, and other sort of societies like that. Back then, we started to see what we could do. Invested in things like heat pumps, had those since 2008. Solar PV back in 2014, so not the first sort of tranche of solar PV, but that's still going. And we invested in things like Ripple's first wind turbines and those sorts of things. But having driven fuel cars for 30 years, hybrids now, then 2008, since about 15 years, and we moved into EVs about 5 years ago. The story started there with 2008, son was born, looking for a new car. We had an old Volvo V40 estate, coming to the end of its life, 10 years old, looking for something which was more economic and slightly more sustainable. We were cross-shopping between a Ford Focus C-Max diesel, and wasn't really convinced with the diesels. People were telling me in the office, it was the time when people were telling us, go out and buy a diesel. Wasn't quite convinced by that. And also a used Toyota Prius, which back then people were telling me, not the right cars, never work, will die after 5 years, have to change the batteries. Sounds like sort of familiar story. And so we went to test drove that brilliant car as an engineering solution. It was a really, really nice design to reduce a lot of the sort of pollution in town and stuff. So I went for that. And we drove that car, which they said would only last for a few years, for 10 years. It's still on the road, 20 years later. The 10 years, it was time to get rid of that. It was too small a car. We needed something which would take 3 bikes in the back, do long distance driving. And back in 2018, electric vehicles were still in their sort of infancy. There was the Tesla Model X would take bikes and stuff, but really not the right sort of thing. So after looking around, we ended up with the Mitsubishi Outlander PHEV plug-in hybrid. Really impressed again with the technology, the fact that you could plug it in now, the fact you could drive electric. And it would do 25 miles to a charge. It still does. We've still got it. And it's a great long distance haul. You just look 3 pipes on the back, put it on the hitch, fill it with a week's worth of camping gear, go down to Dorset, go up to Cornwall, Norwich, those sorts of long distance driving, especially back 5 years ago. Charging network was still sort of in its infancy. When a couple of years later, we needed a second car, we were talking about 2020 now, it was quite clear as a local runaround, an EV would be it. We did look at some cheaper sort of fuel cars and thought, no, we'll go for a full EV. And so we started looking around, and the Zoe was a bit too small. So we went for the Nissan Leaf, 24 kilowatt hour. Really nice cars. Tried to find one which is a nice metallic red they do, full Technica, with front heated seats, back heated seats, all the technology they threw into it. And so we went and bought the Leaf, only 80-mile-an-hour range on it, but that's exactly what we needed, just a city run around, something really cheap to run. Drove that for 3 years, but even though I was taking it on 100, 150 mile an hour, 50-mile sort of trips, it was starting to get tiring, having to stop off every 80 miles to go and find somewhere to charge up. And so after 3 years, it was time to move on. And that's how we ended up moving on into the BYD Dolphin, which we've had about 6 months now.
As you know, if you're a long time listener to the show, I occasionally do these episodes such as this, where we get somebody on like yourself who's driven one of these cars for more than just, the 20-minute test drive or the 2-day test drive, someone who's actually lived with it for a length of time. So talk to me about why you chose the Dolphin versus any of the other vehicles that were potentially available at the time that you made the decision.
So I chose the Dolphin. So I originally test drove an MG4 or Funky Cat down at the Fully Charged show down in Farnborough. It was the first time to try what I'll call a modern electric vehicle, 5 years, or it's a lot newer than the Leaf. And they're both impressive cars. And so when it came to actually making a decision to move on last year, said to my wife, let's go and have a look at a few of these cars. Went down and looked at the Aura Funky Cat at the Grid Serving Braintree. They had one in the display there. Said the boot is far too small. It's not a functional boot. It's sort of a very tight fit. They're given the room to the cabin, which was nice. And the MG4 was a bit big for what we needed. But I had been seeing quite a lot of reviews about this BYD Dolphin, a new car into the UK market. And so they were doing an introductory offer. And I said to my wife, let's go up to Norwich, which is about 60 miles from here. It's the nearest BYD centre. And they're still building it when we turned up there. There was lots of refitting going on. And so we had a test drive of it there and really impressed. It was big inside. It had all the safety features my wife wanted. The 360-degree camera you get, it was a breaker for her. If it hasn't got it, we're not getting it. She needs that sort of safety so she can park and see what's going on around her. We had a test drive in that. She really liked it. But the real deal for that was that we had no cash pot. The Leaf it's now a 10-year-old car. Wasn't going to get much for that. And so it was the deal which came with it. It was, remember now, it's £269 down, £269 a month, 8,000 miles, 4-year PCP. And we went, okay. And they said, which colour do you want? You can have a dirty white or an off grey. And so I ended up with the off grey.
And am I right in thinking there are 3 different spec levels that the Dolphin provides? Which one did you go for?
So the 2 specs we were offered at the time was the comfort of the design. So the design is the top spec. It comes with everything and a sunroof and wireless charging for the phone and a few other bits and pieces with it. But the sunroof then meant there was a sunshade, and the sunshade would have to be rolled back into this lump, which suddenly appeared in the back passenger seat above your head. So we've got a 6-foot sun. I'm 6'2". So I thought, I can't have this big lump. I sat there and I could almost feel it with where I was. So we went for the comfort, which was the next spec down. And so you lose the sunroof, which means you lose the bump. You don't get the vehicle-to-load charging cable, which you can get aftermarket, which is what we did. And you can't get these 2-tone colours and the big funky sort of colour scheme you can get inside. So it was a few reduced palettes. But apart from that, the car is pretty much the same car.
And which battery size did you go for?
So the only ones they had on offer was 60 kilowatt hours. And that's a lithium ferrous phosphate 60 kilowatt hour, which I think they also put in their bigger cars as well. So it gives it it says the quoted range is 265 miles, and the two long trips they've done it, I've been getting 230, 215, but it has been -2 degrees. It has been raining. It's not been the most pleasant weather, but come summer, should easily be able to do 265.
It's interesting. I've just pulled up the EV database for the BYD Dolphin, and it's quoting real range, city cold weather 215, highway cold weather 150, city mild weather 320. Interesting. Highway mild weather 195, combined mild weather 250. Does that kind of gel with what you've been hearing?
Well, I mean, it was quite a long trek. It went from Colchester to Midlands, and it happily did 230 in the cold -2 to +5. I did have the heating on. I wasn't there in gloves and a hat. But in the summer, 250 should not be a problem. And compared to the Leaf doing the 80 miles, anything above 150 is quite pleasant and quite nice. And the charging speed was quite impressive as well. I know it's only 90 kilowatts because it's the LFP, but it's twice as fast as the Leaf ever was, and slightly quicker than I can actually go to the loo.
Interesting. I plugged in a Polestar 2 yesterday on one of the new V4 Tesla superchargers. It was 16 units. They were all being used, and it still pulled it hit 205 kilowatts and then dropped down to about 150, which for me in my little ID3 is kind of, whoa, that is fantastic,
It's getting so fast, though, that you don't actually want to leave the car, because by the time you've gone and got your coffee, then you're hogging a charging space because your car's pretty much full.
Yeah, I mean, that particular one is associated with a McDonald's, so I wandered in, had a pee, grabbed some food, came back. It's kind of, oh no, better go, because a couple of cars waiting. None of them waited more than about 2 or 3 minutes, apart from there was what had been a Corsa E that waited. And the reason it waited is because I believe the charge ports as Tesla Bjorn says, it's on the right side, which is the wrong side, not the left side, which is the right side, or whatever it is. So he was waiting for two to open up so that he could park in one and use the other. He might have been there quite a while.
Yeah, and hogged another space in the meantime, but that's part of where we are in the transition. Again, I've not tried the Tesla superchargers yet with the Dolphin, but because it's on the front right-hand side, provided they don't put a bump stop in the way, it should quite conveniently take a normal Tesla charging spot, just as a going front ways as opposed to back ways.
Yeah. Have I heard anything about the Dolphins on a Tesla unit? I don't think so. I think I've heard about the MGs on a Tesla unit. There could have been issues with those, but I think the BYDs are worth seeing, isn't it? Where is your nearest public supercharger that's open?
Tesla supercharger. I don't think there's one directly near Colchester, but I must have passed a couple on my trips up to Birmingham and other places. I must pop in now that I know I can use them. I've downloaded the Tesla app only last week, so I will go off and try and find one to use.
What's it like? I say I'm comparing at the moment. I'm running around with the Polestar 2, lovely car. Went up over the festive period to see my parents, and my dad decided, this is the man who always either drove or sat in the passenger seat, decided to get into the back. Plenty of room in the back, but he had trouble actually getting in. I mean, he's not a big man. He's kind of slim and slender like me, but the access, the B pillar, a little bit too far back, and he had issues getting in. Have you had any issues like that with the Dolphin?
So this is one of the features. It passed the mother-in-law test, trying to get in and out of the car, both the back seats and the front seats. I think the door opens almost 90 degrees, which gives you really easy access into the back and the front, and the space once you get in there is huge. So don't have problems getting in or out of it, and that's one of the features, isn't it, of electric cars. You can make more space inside when you haven't got all the running gear. It has the flat floor and those sorts of things. The only thing I've ever noticed is the floor's a little higher than I'm used to, but I think that's probably because the skateboard design where the batteries are. Other than that, no, there's been plenty of room. And even the boot's fair size. It's supposed to be smaller than the Leaf, which was a big boot. But it's as long as you put the partition floor down, it allows you to open it up. And you get a fairly big boot as well. So no, plenty of space inside and fairly easy to get in and out of.
Looping back to charging, do you have any idea of what the efficiency figures are, miles per kilowatt hour?
That's an interesting one. The car has a sort of very distributed approach to showing you energy. It will show you miles per kilowatt hour. It will show you kilowatt hours per kilometers. It will show you BH per hour, so British horsepower per hour on another display. And everything's supposed to be set to miles and kilowatt hours. I don't figure that out. So after having to do a lot of calculations, I'm getting about 4.4 miles per kilowatt hour. But when I did a test of the day, it was saying I was getting about 5, but it wasn't showing me what the accessories was using. So one display will and one display won't. So depending which display you're reading, gives you different numbers. So I'd just like one consistent display giving one consistent set of numbers. But it is over 4 miles per kilowatt hour, which for a small car, because this is a small car, it's nice and efficient. Even on a motorway one, it's nice and efficient.
We'll come back to the software in a little while because, one of my personal bugbears on a lot of vehicles is they can't do good software. So we'll talk about that. I've driven cars for the odd years, and for anything other than the last 6 years, I've never had heated seats. I've never had heated steering, and having had those in my last 2 electrics, I can't have one without the other on there. Now, did you say on the spec that you got it didn't have heated seats, or it did?
So on the spec we've got, everything is pretty much the same between the design and the comfort. The one thing that neither of them have is a heated steering wheel. So they've got heated front seats, which you can control. We'll talk about software later, but they've done updates so you can control it now from the center screen quite easily or from the app. But not a heating steering, which I miss from the Leaf. I get cold hands. We quickly got over that once they'd fixed the other heating, which was another issue they had. But they both come with front heated seats, but not in the back on this one.
Talk to me about the heating issue that you just mentioned.
So there's been quite a lot of updates since we got the car. When I got the car, I think it was on version 1.1 of the software. And there's a whole lot of complaints, as you can imagine, on the Facebook and any small thing they complain about. But BYD seems to be doing a whole rapid rollout. I think we're on version 1.6 now of the software. And one of those was, I'd put the heating on, you put it at 20 degrees in the Leaf, that'd be really hot really quickly. And it was lackluster at best. And I thought, it's got a heat pump, so I expected it to heat up quite quickly, and it didn't. But you had to stick it on high, which was for some reasons I can't figure out, spelled H-I, not H-I-G-H. And you stuck it on high, and it would then go really hot. But once they fix the software, it will now heat properly 20, 21 degrees, and the cabin will get really nice, quite warm. But there's all these little minor sort of software updates they've been rolling out over the last 6 months.
What are the sort of little nice to have things have they put in that you don't really realize you need them until you've had them, and then they get taken away?
So I hope they take none of them away. But yeah, so the heated seats now on the front screen. So as soon as you go in, they don't have to go through a menu to get to the heated seats. You can use the voice assistant, which is minimal, but there and can understand you, which is nice. It's no Alexa, there's no AI, but it does work, does do the heated seats and the cabin and the windows and all those sorts of things. Other things they put in, they upgraded the phone, so it does have Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but now it's also done over wireless, so it now will link Bluetooth. They changed the mapping slightly and updated the mapping software. The mapping software is good. It's got a 13-inch display. That's the first thing you'll notice you get into it. This huge sort of center display, very Tesla-like, very high quality resolution, and the mapping really does work quite well. Once it connects to a phone or it's got its own phone signal, it will then show you traffic alerts. And then the last update, it also did charging. So I was doing a charging run and it showed the next grid serve and it showed how many chargers there were, what speeds they were, and how many were in use. And that was a whole, almost, I would say, the Tesla experience, but it doesn't do preconditioning stuff. But these sort of things improve all the time. They turn the bings and the bongs down. So when I first got it, they were quite loud, telling you about speed and those sort of things, and tone those down to sort of nudging you, saying you're going a little bit over the speed limit, or the speed limit's just changed here, have you noticed? So those tone those sorts of things down. So they're improving all the time, listening to people. And I think the last sort of big problem we've got is in this weather, it's cold, it's -2 last night, is it seems to do an air vent just as you turn the car off, which then leaves a whole lot of humid air in the car, and you come back to the car and it looks like it's all steamed up. So that's the latest sort of rant. I'm sure they'll fix that one as well.
On the subject of bings and bongs, I think the one thing that everybody finds annoying on pretty much every electric car is the automatic lane keeping assist, which bings and bongs and then tries to push you down roads that you don't want to do. What's the status with that on the Dolphin?
The Dolphin's got fairly good sort of navigation features. So the automatic cruise control, it's really good for sort of distance levels. So you jump onto a highway, dual carriageway, motorway, and stick that on, and quite happily sit behind somebody, turn the lane centering on, it will do actual center of lane. It doesn't bounce, it doesn't ping pong. There is ability to turn on feature where if you start straying onto a line, if you're driving, it'll do that. But once it's on its own lane centering, it'll keep you there. The only time it has an issue is if the road is going to bend to the right and there is an off-ramp to the left. It always wants to take you off the off-ramp. For whatever reason, I don't know. But you're supposed to keep your hand on the steering wheel anyway, which I do, of course. And just nudge it over and goes, oh, you want to keep on this road, do you? And it'll keep you there, which means that for miles and miles, you don't come across it. But when you come across, when you see it coming, you go, right, just be ready for that. And every single time. But no, it seems to be quite competent until you get onto quite small roads and then it can't see the lines. And it turns around to you and says, I give up, you take over.
So the two questions that I always like to ask when it comes to adaptive cruise control is, what's the slowest speed it will go at in the adaptive cruise control? Is it 30 or is it 20?
It'll kick in. I think the slowest I've done it must be about 28, 29. So it'll do below 30, but then it will stay on all the way to stop and then it'll start again for you. So it'll keep going even though you're in traffic, which is nice. But I don't think I've put it in on anything lower than, say, 28, 29 miles an hour.
And if you're going down the motorway at, 60, 65 and you hit a roadworks at 50, will it automatically reduce the car down to the speed? So will it recognize the speed signs and adjust the speed accordingly?
It does do speed sign recognition. It throws it up in there's a tiny little secondary display in front of the driver. And I had to actually get a pair of glasses to see it because the old cars I didn't need it, but now I need to be able to read a display close to me as well. And it does show up there what the speed is, but it won't change your speed. It'll just stop pinging at you saying, nudge, nudge, you're going too fast. And considering the amount of times it'll pick up maybe a side road speed camera speed sign, or the GPS will kick in and say this is a different speed, or it hasn't noticed that the speed is changed, I'm happy for it to not choose the speed. I'll choose the speed. It just tells me what speed I'm supposed to be doing.
It's interesting on that because the ID3 that I drive will do that. If you're doing 70 and a 50 comes up, it will drop it down to 50. And then at the end of the 50s, it'll take it back up to 70. The Polestar 2 that I'm borrowing at the moment, exactly the same as you said. It will go at 70 and then it'll hit the 50. It will go, oh, you're in the 50 now. Bing, 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 without actually slowing down for you. So I don't know whether that's a software decision or whether that's a hardware limitation or what, but there are some cars that do it one way and some cars that do it the other. And Polestar and the BYD appear to do it that way, and the VW appear to do it the other way, and presume Tesla do it the other way as well.
It's easy to get it wrong, so I'm quite happy it leaves the human in charge. Or if they can turn it off, I don't mind what they do.
There is a particular stretch of the M25 around Heathrow where for some reason the car thinks the speed is 40 miles an hour. So you'll be going down the motorway and suddenly it'll slam the brakes on 40 miles an hour and there is no traffic sign around anywhere. So somewhere in the past when they've loaded up the software and put all the information in there must have been a 40 mile an hour zone there as they were upgrading the motorway, and it just hasn't been updated yet, which probably says more about the people managing the Volkswagen software than it.
Yeah, it when things change rapidly, especially with roadworks and such like, I think I'm quite happy to leave the human in charge.
Indeed. Talk to me about vehicle to load.
Right, yeah, so that's a feature we've not covered yet. So that came with the car, not with a cable. So you buy a second-hand aftermarket cable, about £100. I've never used it before. I wasn't quite sure how I was going to use, so I got a fairly short cable. And then realised that with Octopus, and today, again, we've had it, a couple of hours of free energy, I could fill the car up and then use it for the things. So the main thing I've been using it for is to heat my study. So I will plug into the normal charging port. This just looks like a normal charging connector with a 3-pin socket on the end. And then put that 3-pin socket through the letter flap and then run the fan heater into my study. And I must have used over 60 kilowatt hours out of it, free energy, thanks to Octopus. I mean, in the summer when it comes sunny, be able to charge up with that as well. So you can actually play the game of charging and discharging as you wish. And because it's got 250 miles, it doesn't matter if I'm using 10, 15 kilowatts. Who cares? It's still charged up when I need it and run it around. I've tried it with kettles and an air fryer and stuff. So whenever and the next sort of things I go to, I can make myself my tea and coffee on the road. Or occasionally do things like eco festivals where we take electric vehicles down, so I can take it there and show people the future of how to actually use a vehicle more than just the 5% people use to drive it around. So as far as I'm concerned, now it's a battery which happens to also go places.
I forget where it was I saw it. There was a vehicle that had vehicle-to-load capability, and it said you cannot use this vehicle-to-load capability to charge another car, which I find interesting. Have you tried that by any chance?
I may have done. I've not found that disclosure agreement in the manual. No, I have. I've used it to charge the plug-in hybrid, the Outlander, and that seems to work quite well because it's only a 2.2 kilowatt feed and it's a 3.3 kilowatt source from the Dolphin. So I know it's more well within its capability, and so that worked. Just as an experiment, I've not done it for any longer than a few minutes though.
Okay, let's come and sort of look at the elephant in the room when it comes to electric vehicles, which is the software. Now, we've talked a little bit about the bings and the bongs and like that, but as a general sort of overall impression, does it seem to be that the Dolphin software has been put together by people who've actually driven electric vehicles and know how software should work, or not?
I was quite pleasantly surprised. Again, fairly recent to the table. I mean, obviously BYD is mainly a battery manufacturer, but they've come with a nice software package. And I think it's the fact that they've not downgraded the software package for their second lowest car in the brand now, because they've also got the smaller car as well. And so it's seems to be the same software fit for all of them, the prestige cars and all the way down, premium cars all the way down. And it is impressive. It was one of the first things my wife mentioned about how quick the display is, how fairly intuitive a lot of the menus are. Some of them were hidden, and so they're updating them. And that's the other thing, they're listening to their user base. Can we have this? Can we have that? And things are moving about and things are improving all the time. It has, say, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which was a bit flaky to start off with. It would drop occasionally. That's been fixed. And it has all the usual apps and Amazon Music and karaoke, which my wife seems to like, and a browser, which only works when you're stationary, which is nice, which means you can do YouTube and sit around and high res. It does seem to work, apart from this weird issue to do with metrics, and it can't be consistent, and it doesn't seem to know what it wants to tell you and how it's going to tell you it. So apart from little niggly things like that, I'm really, really impressed.
Key question for me, can you open the glove box without having to use the screen?
It is an old manual lever, full-size glove box, and it is now, after 6 months, full of stuff.
Indeed. Jumping back to sort of feeding back to the company, do you have any idea how that mechanism is? Are they reading the forums, or is it people going into dealers and going, look, this is a problem, we need it changed?
I'm not entirely sure. I know that the dealership I went to, they knew me before I turned up. They said, we've seen you on the Facebook. So at least the dealership knows me, and we've got a good relationship with them. And there is an active community. There must be about 4 forums in the UK dealing with both Dolphin and BYD, and then international forums as well. So somebody's listening somewhere. I've not gone back directly myself. I've just gone back through my suggestions to the dealers, and whether they go back, I must ask them the next time I go up there. I'm due to see them later on this year. But whoever it is or however they're doing, it seems to be working.
Are you happy with it overall as a car?
As a car, yeah. As a great city car, yeah. It does everything we wanted it to do at a price which we weren't expecting. But I think it was what they called a sweetheart deal to come into the UK to get people to start buying them, to see them on the road. I still only see maybe 1 or 2 down here because I'm about 60 miles away from the dealer. But as a car to do the driving around I was doing, yes. The problem now is that it's making the Outlander look very dated. And it's starting to look like it's going to be replaced in the next year or two, clearly with a full electric vehicle. The other ones we're looking at shopping now with is an EV3 or an EV6. So is that sort of spec of car to replace what is an SUV. My son is 16 now. He doesn't want to go camping with us anymore. So that sort of requirements have moved on. But we do still need a big car so we can do the longer miles. And we just end up driving around the Dolphin all the time because it's just quicker and easier. And I can just jump in it and go where I want, when I want, which pretty much is what you do with any fuel car.
Would you say, I know you've talked about some of the longer journeys you've made, but you've just then said it's not really a long distance vehicle. Is that, are you sticking by that? Or do you think if somebody like me, it's my only car, for example, and I do quite a few chunky journeys in a year, would it be something you'd think that would suit somebody like that? Or would it need somebody with a certain aptitude who's happy to make compromises?
It's not like the old days of jumping into an old Austin Metro and forcing it to go 300 miles. So funnily enough, they wouldn't do 300 miles in a tank because they know where this business of having to do 500 miles ever came from. Most of my cars never did. But it is a smaller city, well, bigger than a city car, but it's a smaller sort of family car, which is happily do the long distance mileage as well, comfortably, but it's not a long distance cruiser. So it'll quite happily do it amicably, but it'll also be at home in the city. It sounds like an awful attempt in an advert. It's not. It is just happy to do what it's to do. I think that's, again, because they've not downgraded anything for the comfort and design specs. It is the smaller versions, which have got smaller batteries and lower power. Possibly you wouldn't want to start doing longer journeys. But because they've left it the 60 kilowatts, which is what they use in their kilowatt hours, which is what they use in their bigger vehicles, it's still got the legs to do that sort of journey, even though it may not have been originally designed for it, much more than capable of doing it.
What would you change about it if you could?
What would I change about the car? I'd have the heated steering wheel, please. Anything else? So they are improving features all the time. So we have this problem to do with steaming. That'll be handy this time of year. The boot could be just a little bit bigger. I could do with a couple of clips in the boot. We are talking really minor stuff here. Everything else seems to work quite well. So considering where we started, with the 2010 design of the Leaf, to where we are 15 years later, it's as good as any fuel car I've ever had, and better in many respects. The 360-degree camera is really impressive, and the software they're running is really impressive. So I think it's if others catch up, I don't know if it's sort of Tesla-esque. I've never driven a Tesla. Oh, correction, I did drive a Tesla Model X once. I was really impressed. So it's that sort of level of spec. So if everything else catches up to that, then I'm not really missing anything else.
Thank you, Adrian. Great conversation.
Thank you very much, Gary.
So let's summarise. The BYD is a great little car that packs in lots of goodies, but not a lot of money. It has a reasonable range, but the long-distance journeying can be hampered by a relatively slow charge speed. Some of the additional BYD functionalities, such as vehicle-to-load, can be useful. Adrian told me after we recorded that he has managed to charge his plug-in hybrid Mitsubishi Highlander from the Dolphin, and it works. So, anyone out there also driving the Dolphin? How are you finding it? Let me know. info@evmusings.com. This season, we're looking at raising the education and awareness of our listeners with a myth-busting fact from Colin Walker, Transport Lead at the Environmental Climate Intelligence Unit.
When it comes to hitting EV sales targets, the car industry is doing a lot better than they're letting on. That's because of something that's not widely understood. Selling EVs is not the only source of the credits that you need to earn to hit the zero-emission vehicle mandate. They can also be earned if you make reductions to the CO2 emissions of the petrol and diesel cars that you sell. So how does this work in practice? Well, as we know, the ZEV mandate target for 2024 was 22%. For the whole year, the car industry managed to hit 19.6% for EV market share. But it also earned around a further 3% from those CO2 emission reductions that I mentioned. Yes, there were variations between manufacturers. Some overperformed, some underperformed. But these figures mean that, as a whole, the industry hit the 22% target and complied with the mandate. Same story in 2025. The target's gone up to 28%. Industry forecasts that it will hit 23.6% EV sale market share for the year. But New Automotive has calculated that the industry only needs to hit 23.1% to comply with the mandate because of those extra CO2 emission credits that it will earn. So treat claims by the industry that it's struggling to hit the mandate with a pinch of salt. It's doing much better than it's letting on.
It's time for a cool EV or renewable thing to share with your listeners. Just 2 years ago, 10% electric equipment operation seemed like an ambitious target for Sweden's pioneering fossil-free construction site. Last week, the site reached a 50% all-electric threshold with the addition of a new Volvo L120h electric conversion wheel loader. This 50% electric operation rate has doubled its initial goal of 10% in just 2 years. This significant leap showcased the effectiveness of electric equipment in reducing carbon footprints on construction sites. As the industry embraces greener technologies, this project sets a compelling precedent for the future of construction. The project has produced a CO2 savings, Volvo's word, of 2,759 tonnes as of June 2024, which is the equivalent of about 600 internal combustion engine cars driving a full year. That feat, the first phase of the multi-year plan, earned the project a Sustainable Construction Project of the Year award at the annual Swedish Green Building Awards. I love it when we can electrify things people think can't be electrified. Brings a smile to my face. The EV Musings podcast is sponsored by ZapMap, the go-to app for EV drivers, helping you find and pay for public charging with confidence. ZapMap is free to download and use with subscription plans for enhanced features, such as using ZapMap in-car on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto, and discounted charging across thousands of charge points. I hope you enjoyed listening to today's show. It was put together this week with the help of Adrian Bond. Many thanks to Adrian for his time. If you have any thoughts, comments, criticisms, or other general messages to pass on to me, I can be reached at info@evmusings.com. I'm on the socials, on Blue Sky at evmusings.bsky.social. I'm also on Instagram at EV Musings, where I post short videos and podcast extracts regularly. Why not follow me there? Thanks to everyone who supports me through Patreon on the monthly basis and through coffee.com on an ad hoc one. Now, if you enjoyed this episode, why not buy me a coffee? Go to coffee.com/evmusings and you can do just that. ko-fi.com/evmusings. Takes Apple Pay too. Regular listeners will know about my 2 ebooks. So You've Gone Electric and So You've Gone Renewable. They're 99p each or equivalent, and you can get them on Amazon. Check out the links in the show notes for more information, as well as a link to my regular EV Musings newsletter and associated articles. Now, I know you're probably driving or walking or jogging now as you listen to this. If you can remember, and you enjoyed this episode, drop a review in iTunes, please. Really helps me out. Thanks. If you've reached this part of the podcast and are still listening, thank you. Why not let me know you've got to this point by tweeting me at MusingTV with the words, Flipper? Surely not. Hashtag if you know, nothing else. Thanks as always to my co-founder Simon. He's gradually increasing the speed he goes on his electric unicycle, but as he goes faster and faster, the chances of him having an accident increase. But he's got full life insurance, which is great. And one person's quite happy about that, though.
So this is one of the features. It passed the mother-in-law test.
Thanks for listening. Bye.